Greetings, friends. This is Steve Dupuie for the Bible News Prophecy Program with Dr. Bob Thiel. Dr. Thiel, as I read the Bible, I sometimes come across a verse that doesn't make much sense to me. One such verse is Daniel 11, verse 20. There shall arise in his place one who imposes taxes on the glorious kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, but not in anger or battle. Would the one who raises taxes be an individual or a governmental body such as the IRS in the United States?
Well, first of all, what it will not be is the Internal Revenue Service of the United States of America. Let me start off with that because this is actually a prophecy regarding a European power. And so it's got nothing to do with the United States that way. Yes, it will be an individual, and yes, there will be a government behind it.
Okay. Well, it seems like every individual and every governmental agency since the creation of mankind has wanted to raise taxes. For the sake of discussion, let's take the fairly recent move by the European Union to be the first to impose a global tax on corporations. Would this be an example of what Daniel is talking about? And can you discuss that proposal for us?
Let me discuss the proposal first. The European Parliament on May 19, 2022, approved a minimum corporate tax of 15% on large multinational corporations. And its implementation deadline is the 31st of December, 2022. So that was interesting because it was different than anything that had been done before. But I don't believe that is the fulfillment of this particular prophecy. On the other hand, the other thing that's been going on is the European Union has been looking at having something called a carbon border adjustment mechanism, or CBAM. And this is supposed to basically raise taxes for people who produce carbon emissions, not just within the European Union, but for things that they import. And the problem with that type of a thing is that it will raise taxes for all consumers pretty much within Europe. And Europe's already facing an official inflation rate of just over 9% right now. And so if you add a tax on top of it, this is going to be something that the average person is going to see. And while the EU's got those kind of goals, they may hesitate on it at this instant just because of the fact that there's inflation going on. Now, interestingly, I received a question this past week about basically what in the United States we'd call a windfall profits tax on oil companies or energy companies. And so somebody from Australia asked me, is this a possible example of the raiser of taxes? And so what he's talking about was, again, this idea that they will put an extra tax on utility companies, energy companies, and then they'll use that money for some other purpose, perhaps to lower the rates or something. But that also, no, I don't believe that is the fulfillment of this particular prophecy. Now, some people have wondered, does this have future application or not? Well, on May 1st, 1967, the late pastor general of the old Radio/Worldwide Church of God said that Daniel 11:21, which is the next verse, has future applications. Let me read what he had written on this. He says in Daniel 11:21, referring to original typical fulfillment in Antiochus Epiphanes, there shall stand up a vile person. So once again, before the second coming of Christ, a vile leader will stop daily sacrifices of being offered. The same prophecy spoken by Jesus is also reported by Luke, chapter 21, verses 20 to 24.
So would that make the ultimate identity of the raiser of taxes the fulfillment of a prophetic event?
Well, before this vile person rises up, we have the raiser of taxes issue. So let me just read this from the New King James, Daniel 11, verses 20, and the first part of 21. It says, there shall arise in his place one who imposes taxes on the glorious kingdom. But what is the glorious kingdom? It's going to be a revised, raised up European empire. This is not the current EU the way we currently see it, although he could be with the EU first when this is going on. But what's interesting is this raiser of taxes says within days he's going to be destroyed, not in anger or in battle, and in his place will arise the vile person. Now, the vile person, Herbert Armstrong pointed this out, it's consistent with other biblical prophecies, looks to be the one who's called the final king of the north in the book of Daniel, chapter 11. Also, the final beast of the sea that we can read about in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, verses 1 through 10. Now, when you look at the Hebrew, and I'm not a Hebrew scholar, and I've tried to look at this, I believe this is probably talking to a male, but it's not necessarily exclusionary. So it is possible that this could be a female. And if this happens, after this happens, we go back to Daniel chapter 11. We see about this vile person comes in, says he's going to come in peaceably and seize the kingdom by intrigue. And cutting down verse 23 says some kind of a league is made with him. He's going to act deceitfully. He comes up. He's going to become strong with a small number of people, which is sort of consistent with the prophecy of the beast in Revelation chapter 17, 12 to 13. And then it says, verse 24, he's going to enter peaceably, even into the richest places of the province, and shall do what his fathers have not done, nor his forefathers. Now, since we're talking about a European power, and this leader is probably Germanic, and we know World War I, World War II, there were leaders from Germany or Austria, in Hitler's case, is Germanic, who made certain attempts to win certain wars. They did not succeed. But there's a prophecy that unlike his fathers and forefathers, this person is going to succeed. And it says he's going to disperse among them the plunder, the spoil, and the riches, because he's going to devise plans against the strongholds. That is, whatever power, military power is the strongest, but he'll only succeed for a time. So all these things tie in with some major prophetic events going on.
That's really fascinating, Dr. Thiel, that the understanding that we have about what this person will accomplish that his fathers and forefathers have not done. So this raiser of taxes would appear just before the final king of the north?
Yes. Now, the final king of the north, according to Daniel 9, 26 and 27, is actually called a prince before he becomes a king. So he'll be on the scene in some capacity, but he won't be the top guy until after a reorganization, which I mentioned before from Revelation chapter 17, 12 to 13. But yes, this is an important event for the future.
Okay, so why do we feel that this event, this prophecy, is still for the future and not the past?
Well, various ones have felt it was for the past. For example, Herbert Armstrong mentioned it had a typical fulfillment, one in the past. And he actually wrote regarding verse 19 of Daniel 11, it says, Antiochus next turned his attention to the fortresses of his own land in the east and the west, but attempting to recruit with his dissipated wealth by plunder of the Oriental temple. And he was killed in 187 BC. Verse 20. Seleucus IV, his son, in an effort to raise money, sent a tax collector, Heliodorus, through Judea, but he only reigned 11 years. Then Heliodorus poisoned him. Verse 21, he left no heir, but his brother, a younger son of Antiochus the Great, named Epiphanes, Antiochus IV, a contemptible reprobate, came by surprise through flattery, took the kingdom. So a lot of people say, well, see, that was for the past. But if you look through Daniel 11, you see a lot of the prophecies are actually for the appointed time. In verse 27, verse 29, verse 35. And what appointed time? According to Daniel 11, 27, 35, and 40, the time of the end. So this chapter has future fulfillment. And even though some modern Roman Catholics and certain Protestants have a different view, even the Greco-Roman saint and doctor of their church, Jerome, said this was for the future time, got to talk about the time of the final Antichrist. So scripture says it, and we can go back to, again, people such as Jerome, who understood this was for the future. And I said Herbert Armstrong said it's for the future, but again, the real reason we know it's for the future is because the Bible says it's for the appointed time of the end, and that did not happen during the time of Antiochus Epiphanes.
So does that mean that the death of the raiser of taxes would be the way in which they would be identified, or would they be identified because they raised taxes?
Well, politicians raise taxes, okay? So just raising taxes of itself is not it. So we would want to see, or we expect to see, this person will die. This may happen perhaps after December 2024. We'll see. But the death would be important. And we'll find out what kind of taxes are being raised. Maybe it's some type of carbon tax that, again, affects everybody. But the Bible doesn't say what kind of taxes will be raised, but does talk about the raiser taxes being dies for some strange way. So that's what we'd be looking for. And that would be an interesting prophetic thing to watch for, because that would pretty much tell us the clock is really ticking on some other things.
Right. Dr. Thiel, you have a free electronic daily newsletter that offers insights into current worldly events that are of a prophetic nature. Can our listeners get a free subscription to this newsletter?
Yes. Now, it's a little bit tricky. If you go to BibleNewsProphecy.net, you can actually click on something that says, quote, click here for current news and analysis, as well as links to literature in over 120 languages. Well, if you click there, it'll bring you to the Cogwriter news page, which you can also get to by going to BibleNewsProphecy.com. Okay. But from BibleNewsProphecy.net, you can click to get over there. And when you get there, over on, when you're looking at the screen on the right, you'll see a couple of search boxes. Then there's a third box. And in that third box, it says, enter your email in order to get this daily free newsletter. And what this newsletter has is basically a paragraph about the news items that were published there each day. Sometimes it'll bunch a bump up, so you might get 10, but most of the time you get 3 or 4. It comes out almost every day. And the reason listeners might be interested in that is on our particular radio broadcast and this sermon, we're only going through one of these per week, whereas I'm posting usually 21 or more every week. So there's a lot more information. And when we do the sermonettes, a lot of times I'm summarizing news items, whereas if you go get the newsletter, you click on there, you can get the actual sources and find out, okay, this came from Europe source, a British source, an American source, what's the source? Go back and look to be sure what we're saying is correct. And of course, we try to say things that are backed up by the Bible, as well as by world events and sources that we think are reliable. Of course, you can't always trust all the news sources in the world these days, but there is a lot of information out there, and there's a lot going on prophetically, not just involving Europe, but things going on in the Middle East, things involving the United States, situations, for example, with Russia and Ukraine. So there's a lot going on, and if you get the daily newsletter, I think it helps people keep people up to speed.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Thiel. For more interviews with Dr. Thiel, written articles, and videos, visit our website at BibleNewsProphecy.net. This is Steve Dupuie for the Bible News Prophecy Program.